The Living Clean podcast is not affiliated with Narcotics Anonymous, nor do we speak on behalf of NA as a whole. We are simply members sharing our personal experiences and perspectives in recovery based discussions. The opinions expressed here are our own and not those of Narcotics Anonymous as a fellowship. This is the Living Clean podcast. This podcast is not meant to replace meetings, sponsorship, step work, or service. This podcast is meant to be another tool in your recovery toolbox. Our guests are here to share their experience, strength, and hope with recovery through Narcotics Anonymous. Thank you for joining us.
I'm here with Pete and Pete and George, my bad, from the Bristol Lit Committee, and they're going to tell us a story about writing of one of the chapters in the basic text, cut and paste. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm George. I'm an addict, and so actually, we're from Bristol Lit, but I also chaired Philadelphia Lit, and basically those guys. Yeah, I used to go down to Northeast Philly and announce that we were working on the basic text, and if anybody wanted to participate, and they all went by public transportation. So they asked me if we could move our committee down there, and our committee didn't want to move there. So then they asked me if I could start another committee there. And so Bristol, it was working on chapter 8 of the basic text. And when I went to start their first lit committee, they asked me to get another chapter. They didn't want to work on Bristol's leftovers per se. They wanted their own chapter. They wanted Philadelphia to put a mark on the basic text. So I called Bo up, and Bo sent chapter 10. And we did prior to, this was in between the Second World Literature Conference, which was late September of 1980, till the Memphis Conference, which was January 31st, 1981. And so we worked through, doing the cut and paste, and they had a huge committee. The first meeting I remember, it was in somebody's house, and it was in their living room. And I couldn't even walk into the room. There was that many people sitting down waiting to, participate. It was, a real big buzz at this point that our book was being written, and everybody wanted to give back and be a part of it, So when it came time for the convention, Bo told me to bring all the work that was done on chapter 8 with Bristol Lit, and all the work that was done on chapter 10. This is all the cut and paste, putting it into the outline from Philadelphia Lit, to bring them both with me when I came to Memphis. And then the night before, or actually, I guess the morning of, I was reviewing the work done on chapter 10, because they got off to a later start because Bristol Lit was already meeting, and Bristol Lit had a few meetings working on chapter 8 before Philly Lit even started on chapter 10. So I was just kind of reviewing the work, and I left I sat chapter 10 on the bed, the night table next to the bed, and I went about my thing, and when I left for the conference, I left it there. So when I got down there, I'm going through my stuff, and I can only find chapter 8, and then it dawns on me, oh my God, I left it, at the I left it in my bedroom. So I called Pete up, and I said, Pete, go check and see if it's there, and Pete looks. Now, there's no cell phones, and so like you'd have to know when to call everybody. It was completely different, time, and so he looks and he says, yeah, it's here. And I said, Pete, you got to drive it down here. And Pete was wasn't willing, let's just put it that way, but I'll let Pete pick it up from here as to what happened.
I'm an addict. My name is Pete. Originally from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I'm in the Rappahannock area now in Fredericksburg, Virginia. But yeah, that phone call you know, I had just started back to college. Our other roommate Al had talked me into enrolling in Bucks County Community College, and I was just starting classes, and I had a new job because I had to get I still had to work because I still had to have a lot of bills and commitments and stuff. So I was working and going to school, and I just was like, he wanted me to drive to Memphis, and I knew that was about a 20-hour drive, and I was like, that ain't happening. I've had too much trouble hanging on to jobs. I didn't want to be blowing them off left and right. So anyway, I'm like, listen, I'll figure out a way to get it there. And I think I tried Federal Express and UPS, and it just was neither one of them could get it there the next day. And I was just trying to figure out what would be the best way. And I thought about, I checked the Philadelphia airport to see if they had any flights going out to Memphis. And they didn't have any more that day. So I was talking to our friend Rich M, and he said, try the other airport. I didn't know there was another airport in Philadelphia. Turns out the one was actually close to where we were. It was the Northeast Philly, and I did try there. I think Rich had a number that I could call to check on flights, and turns out there was a flight going to Memphis from that airport. And so I drove Chapter 10 over to that airport, and I just found a trusting looking person, and and trusted the manuscript of Chapter 10 to them, and said, could you take this to Memphis? The person first, at first they kind of looked at me like, what, like, is this some kind of scam? And I said, lives might depend on that. you know there was a flight going out of the Northeast airport, and I got it to the airport, and gave it to a lady that looked trustworthy. And she looked at me kind of funny at first, and I just said, lives might depend on this. And she got the gravity of the situation, so she was happy to do it. And I told her there will be a guy named George that'll meet you in Memphis. And I somehow I got a hold of George in Memphis and told him, that arrangement, and he managed to get out there to get it from her. And you know I think somebody once asked me if that was the only copy we had of it, and yeah, it was. So we were trusting that we had God with us on this one. Like what could go wrong?
So I was telling Pete, which we didn't really talk about before, but Bo wasn't sure that that was going to get there, and he was afraid of the chapter being held up. So he had me do the cut and paste uh, again at Memphis, and I finished it. Then Pete, or almost finished it. I don't, because I was chairing the cut and paste at the Memphis conference, the workshops that till all the chapters were finished. Bo wanted me to do that, and so when I went to the airport and picked it up, like I felt so guilty because I felt like I let the Philadelphia guys down, like we spent all this time doing all this work, and I'm the one that's like redoing it, and so when I got the stuff, we redid the cut and paste again with the cut and paste stuff that was already done, and then we added the Philly stuff and we combined them together. So they're actually Chapter 10 had the Philly cut and paste and the Memphis cut and paste together, in the chapter. That's how that one happened. And I don't like, I remember going to the airport. I don't remember how I might have called you, or maybe there were local people there. Maybe I might have given you, somebody's not, I don't really remember how we
It might have
came.
been through Joseph, because I
Yeah.
had Joseph's number.
Okay, that might have been, but you know
Yeah.
what? I remember getting to the airport, and the lady giving it to me, and like, just like it was like unreal, like,
Yeah.
like how does this get here? But but yeah, it was pretty fun, you know.
Yeah, I'd say we were pretty resourceful
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
group. Like I didn't know what to do, but Rich was the one that helped me figure out that Northeast airport, and you know, that's how we did stuff, man. We did it as a team, like I don't think any one of us could have figured half this stuff out, but as a team, we'd always come up with creative solutions,
Boy, did we have a good team too, though.
Oh my
All the
God. Yeah.
like we had artists, we had writers, we had typists. Like it just was everybody. Like Pete said, nobody had all the skills to do it, but together we were really tight group that depended
Yeah.
on each
Yeah.
other to get stuff done. And it like we go, who wants to do this? And then I can do it. And that's how I got a connection. I can
Yeah.
do that, it was really a good group to work with.
Well, and George was a good chair because George was really good at empowering people. I mean, he might not have thought of it that way, but I mean, George was really good at letting people run with whatever they could do, and and he knew how to talk to people. See, my skills were typing and editing and stuff like that and writing, but man, oh man, I was like very, very nervous in any group of people. I mean, the VA had named my condition a nervous condition. That's what my VA disability was for, a nervous condition. And man, I was nervous. Most of I was a basket case in groups of people, but put me in behind a typewriter or give me something to do, and I'm like I'm yours, man. I'm here all day.
So let me ask you a question about these two chapters. One of them was "Moral Be Revealed," and the other one was "We Do Recover." Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Yep.
And so, which one was left at the bedstand? That was the Philly one. That was "Moral Be Revealed."
Yeah,
We
chapter
do.
10.
Yeah, more would be revealed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know of other chapters that were farmed out to other groups?
I know that there was other ones done uh, because when we got to Memphis, Bo had asked me to. So let's go back after the Second World Literature Conference, a couple weeks after. So that was September, into September 1980. Sometime in October, Bo calls me up and he says, "I have this idea. Instead of waiting till January 1st to start doing more work on our book, why don't, I had this thought, we have these local literature committees that aren't working on the book. Why don't we I'll send each committee a chapter that they can do the cut and paste on." And I was like, okay, uh, uh, so when, so from the get-go, I knew that there were other committees, local committees that were going to be working on it. And I don't recall, I do know that there were some chapters that were partially done. They weren't completed, like chapter 8s and chapter 10s, but how many I couldn't really recall. But at the beginning of the Memphis conference, um, I copped a resentment with Bo, which I copped a lot of resentments. I had one with Jimmy K, and so like I was a 21-year-old kid that knew everything, and it was underappreciated, Uh, but uh, but anyway, Bo had asked me to do the workshops, the cut and paste workshops at Memphis, because the chapters that were already the cut and paste work was done, they were going to start on editing and reviewing those chapters. And they had to figure out a process. They hadn't, like, this was a new step for the book. They hadn't done this and they weren't sure exactly how that was going to happen. So he wanted to concentrate on that. And he said, but he didn't explain all this to me till later. And he asked me to do the cut and paste. Well, I've been doing cut and paste for twice a week for months now. I was looking forward to the editing and reviewing. And when he cut me out of the edit and reviewing and had me doing more cut and paste, I felt like I was demoted. So I was pissed off and I went up to him and I said, what he asked me to do was to take every chapter that wasn't complete and finish the cut and paste on it, in a workshop, to workshop it, all whatever was undone, my task was to bring it all up to complete, that, and so when I confronted him about it, what he said is, "You have more cut and paste experience than anybody in Narcotics Anonymous. That's why I asked you. Now I can concentrate 100% on the edit and reviewing, knowing that the cut and paste is in safe hands." So by that conversation here that I just explained to you, I knew that not all the chapters were complete, but that there were chapters that had work on, and there were chapters that were complete. But exactly how many and what, I probably spent 2 days doing cut and paste in workshops till we got it all complete. Oh, yes, I see Mason's hand up. You have a
Yeah.
question? Yeah.
Hey, Pete and George, by the way, I got here a little late, so I didn't get to properly say hello. It's good to see
Hi,
you.
Mason. It's good to see
It's
you.
good to see you, Mason.
Yeah. So my question is, you were working on these specific chapters, and these chapters follow the outline of the little white book. Now, when you were receiving input from the fellowship, were people tasked to write under specific, um, under those chapters? Like, did they know that they were writing for the chapter or more will be revealed, or are you just taking the complete input and trying to fit it into that specific chapter?
Oh,
Well, one of the things they did in Lincoln was they came up with the outlines and the chapters, and they went through all the input, the two trunkfuls of input they had, and they separated it up by, right, George? And they
yeah,
separated it up by
into
the
chapters.
so when George said that Bo sent us the stuff for chapter 10, it was all that stuff that had already been written from, like, for years, that had gone into Jimmy in the office, and that had come in when Bo first became chair of World Lit. They put out a call for input, and it was just input. Tell us it wasn't on any specific thing. So a call never went out for specific input on the chapters. It was everything that people had written got separated by the committee into that. And then later, after Memphis, that the when the gray book went out, then it was specific input was requested on everything that was in the gray book, like, and people did send specific input on that. That's probably where the most the most specificity on input happened, was in the three conferences after Memphis, where we worked on everything that the fellowship sent in, responding to the gray book. So yeah.
So to give you a little more info on that, Mason, in Lincoln, so Greg went on to talk about all the literature in the Foot Locker, the two Foot Lockers, how sacred it was. It was written by death row inmates. It was written by cancer patients, people that aren't here anymore, that wanted to leave their legacy about how they found recovery, and hopefully that they could help somebody else. And what Greg had said is, our book has already been written. This was in Lincoln. He says it's in these two Foot Lockers. We need to figure out how to get it out of these off of these pages that they're in, and get it into a book form. And we did that through, at Memphis, we sorted it into the chapters, what chapter we believed everything, and then we did an outline, from the little white book. We took each chapter, and we had like a 2-page outline, and that's how we did the cut and paste. Is you went from the outline, and you started from 1, and then you went to 2, then to 3, and it would start with the, like, if I was chairing the meeting, what I would do is I would go, okay, we're now on. I would read whatever the outline said for that part. And we said, does anybody have an opening sentence or paragraph? Because what we would do is disperse all the information in the chapter. And before we got started, everybody would look at the 5 or 6 or 8 pages that they were given, and you got familiar with it. And then when I read the outline, you would look through your stuff, and if you had something that you would read it, and then maybe somebody else would read something, and we would pick one or the two, or we go that one first, that one second, then we read them together, and we go, yeah, that's it. And then but we also we also did that with the service prayer. We said the service prayer, and we were asking God to use us as instruments of His will. And so it felt really spiritual when we had the right combination. Like this is how this was meant to be.
So I have a question. I was just on the Anonymous podcast last night, and Eric was talking about like each line in the basic text. What there was a group conscience taking for each line, and I suspect that like so. First of all, there's the cut and paste, and then somebody types it up, and then you guys go over what was typed up, and then you add things to it. And like so, not only I don't know, but I suspect that every line there was like a group conscience in every line over and over and over again in each chapter. And then like you sent out a line by line draft, which was the Memphis Review draft, and then the whole fellowship, like a draft would go out to the Des Moines Literature Committee, and they would go through it line by line by line, and they would make suggestions, and so not only was there a lot multiple group conscience line by line in the workshops, but also in the workshops that were done locally as well. Does that ring true, or how often was God kind of put into the process of each line in the basic text?
So for me, every time we worked on it, we always, at conferences at our local literature review committee, we prayed regularly, and especially if it usually didn't get heated, it usually flowed really well. But I wanted so the rough draft was put together. That was like done prior to Memphis and at Memphis. Then that was reviewed. What was done there with the cut and paste, and then that was what the grade book was. Then you had for the next year, I guess, people sending in input from their local literature committees reviewing the grade book. Santa Monica, Warren, and then Fort Lauderdale were basically mostly putting that input into the book and then editing and reviewing that after that was done, to where what you said line by line. Al will probably talk about this also, because I wasn't there. I don't know, Pete. Pete, were you in Miami or no? Florida?
Not Miami. I was at Warren.
Okay.
And Warren and Ivyland. But
So
and that's in Warren, we did a extensive. There were group conscience meetings. Well, in addition, you had each workshop was doing group conscience meetings over their the material that they worked on, but twice a day. I think they did twice a day. They would have a group conscience with the whole group, and we would go over whatever had been finished in workshops at those group consciences. So, and Warren went on. I think it went on for 9 days. It seems like it was about 9 days, but that happened at least twice a day. And going through stuff. And this is when we're filtering in the input that people had. And well, we also had the at the beginning of Warren, we're piecing together some of the stuff that had gotten lost in Santa Monica. So, that was a little, there was a ton of work, but, everybody was just like, there were 75 people there. We had run of this old schoolhouse, and everybody had a role. Everybody was active. The coffee was strong and the sleep was little to none. I can remember catching cat naps behind the typewriter, just with my head down on the typewriter, and I get up and I just finished, keep typing whatever I'd started typing before I took my little nap, But that was there were a lot of group conscience. So this stuff was gone through so many times. That's why whenever somebody says, well, so and so wrote this, I'm a little suspicious, because so many things got taken through so many times. It's like it truly was it was God working through us. It wasn't anyone's person's work.
It started
even the tradition stuff that Greg, the famous Greg, the 14-hour phone calls with Greg, I learned this only in about 2 years ago, that, from people out there, that Greg had spent months, maybe longer, going around and having discussion groups with people on the traditions. And he took notes, and he got input on the traditions. So that's stuff that everyone says Greg wrote the traditions. Greg put the traditions together. He probably wrote a lot of it too, but he didn't write all the tradition stuff. He took the responsibility to get that shit together. And then he dictated, when he couldn't get to Memphis, he dictated what he had put together over the phone. Now that was new information for me. All these years I thought Greg
that makes
just,
a lot of sense too.
Yeah, and that's what Greg would do. That was his way. He was always very inclusive. He wanted, and he didn't have these great ideas about his own brilliance that everyone seems to have developed over him. He knew he was just another addict, and he took responsibility. He was the first one who drew a line in the sand and said, "I'm going to stake my life and my recovery on NA," and that was the beginning of what turned into us needing our own literature, because if we don't need the other fellowship, we need our own literature. Yeah.
So I wanted to finish one thing. So I was talking about Al. Al had told me that Fort Lauderdale, I was told they say Miami, but I think it was in Fort Lauderdale, really. But he said that his job at that conference was they went line by line, group consciencing every line in the basic text, and that's to the very last line in the book. That was how like that's how they, after everything was all done, they went, is everybody okay with this line? Is everybody okay with this line?
Yeah.
But there were so many different, like you said, local literature. People will say to me, "Do you know so and so? I heard that they helped write the basic text." Man, I don't know if I know 1% of the people that helped write the basic text.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and when people ask me, they say, "You helped write I said, "I helped put it together." Like that. That's really, we really didn't write it. It was already written when I started working on it.
Like I feel like like there were the conferences, there was the work that was done between the conferences, there was the work that was done like with reviewing the drafts that went out, like so the fellowship got to participate in giving input as well. Like people will say, "Yeah, I worked on the basic text," but what they were doing was, there was a local workshop where they were reviewing the Memphis review draft. And yes, they were helping write the basic text because they got to do it in a local committee. It's all true. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Anybody who sent input into the World Service Office in throughout the 70s, and anyone who sent it into the World Service Conference when Bo put out the call, they all helped write the basic text.
So I want to give you this one example of a guy in the Philly committee. He came up to me crying. He said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" And I'm like,
It's a
"Yeah,
great
sure."
story. Yeah.
And he says, "Dude, I want to give back. I want to help. I can't read or write. Can you give me something to do? I want to be a part of this process. I want to give back to Narcotics Anonymous what Narcotics Anonymous has given to me. Please get." And like, I don't know where it came from, but I gave him scissors and I gave him a glue stick, and I said, where they tell you to cut, you can do that. You can glue it on the thing. I said, you can also hear. He handed out all the material to the different people, but he got involved and he participated, and then afterwards he came up crying, thanking me for allowing him to participate in the process. Like that was really moving for me.
Similar story in Warren. A guy went up to Jim Miller, and he couldn't read or write, and but he could cook. And we were in the schoolhouse, and it had we had a whole workable kitchen, and the guy said, I can't read and I can't write, but I can cook. And he said, if you guys want to take up a collection every day, I'll go shopping and come back and I'll keep you guys fed for the next 10 days or however long it was. And that man, there was always something. When you got hungry, you went down to the kitchen and he'd always have a plate of something out, and he would do meals. And we even did a banquet. I think on Saturday night we did a big banquet that this guy, he handled everything. And it wasn't like, it was amazing. It was amazing, and he got to feel like he helped,
Yeah. Oh, he did. Yeah.
I
Yes, he
understand
did.
I understand there was about 100 pages of material at the first World Literature Conference. And then by the second World Literature Conference, there was 800 pages of material. So somebody did contribute in the front end. I think Greg had done some work. There's a letter by Greg from 1972 asking for input. But I think one of the things that Bo had that Greg didn't have was the service structure. It was almost like we needed. I think Greg might have been even tasked with trying to get the book together, but it didn't happen because the NA tree wasn't written. So Greg wrote the NA tree. We needed a champion to create this service structure, and Greg was that guy. He wasn't the guy for the book. And then somehow, a champion came forward to write the book, which was Bo, right? And I think that we had a twinkle in our eye for a book, but I think it was conceived in San Francisco when Bo showed up. We interviewed a guy named Tommy B that said he put a bug in his ear about maybe you should write the book, and he said he saw the wheels start turning, and Greg and Jimmy empowered him to do it. And then it went from there. And for whatever reason, he wrote that little manual after the first World Literature Conference that got spread around, and local literature committees cropped up because of that little manual. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without the local literature committees like Philly and Bristol that were Bristol was already in place. What I mean? You guys were already writing, organically, magically, when you called Bo on the phone and called him Boo. That was part of the the serendipitous moment, that was happening, because people were already writing. It just needed more movement. So
I get goosebumps every time I think about that,
When you talk about we were writing, so after we met Bo at the East Coast Convention, physically, but our phone call was only, Pete, I don't know if you realize this, but the regional meeting that we went to was in May, and the East Coast Convention was in June. So we weren't meeting for very long before we called Bo.
No, I think we were meeting more than once a week, though. I think we were meeting a couple times a week.
I don't remember, but
because we had worked on we had done a lot of stuff already by the time the first East Coast Convention rolled around.
Well, we were already doing the public relations.
But I'm just talking about because
we were starting to get organized, but
I had to take these because remember we would do we would meet and talk about a step and go around the room, and we had the cassette recorder going, and I would take the cassette recorder home and type it up on my old Underwood typewriter.
But that didn't happen until the regional meeting. And the regional meeting was
that was in May. Yeah,
it was in May. It was only it happened so fast.
But we got a lot done between May and that East Coast Convention because man, I'll tell you,
at a time.
I had a stack of stuff that we had already worked on by the time the convention rolled around.
Yeah, and so at the East Coast Convention when I met Bo, he was like, "Oh, I should have brought he didn't bring the literature handbooks." And I asked him, I was doing public relations, so he gave me a public relations handbook. These weren't things that I even knew existed. and then he gave me the NA tree, and he went over we met in Greensville, South Carolina in July, 2 weeks after the East Coast, 2 or 3 weeks after, and he went over, and then he told me to take the literature handbook and form our committee to it. He also gave me NA tree, or I'm sorry, not NA tree, the Rainbow Connection, which Pete will pop up on this one. But anyway, I thought he was. They asked for submissions to the Rainbow Connection, and somebody in our group got an article published. And once that happened, man, I bet you everybody wrote at least 3 articles apiece that we sent down to the Rainbow. They had enough newsletters for 6 months or a year after, because we all wanted to get published, and I thought that, like, when I later looked on it, I'm like, we actually wrote their newsletter, for them for months.
Our creative juices were flowing full bore, man. We just, we was a creative group, and when we came together, it was just like,
Yeah, I think that was possible.
If you read the mainline newsletter from Northern California, during that time, there was like a ton of history about the basic text. But like Nashville would submit to it. Alabama, there's Alabama history in the Northern California newsletter, and so in that manual, it taught, there was a workshop about newsletters, and I think that newsletters were a hub of communication for the basic text, how like the social media of the time, but also it could have been also a tool for like generating new literature. Like I know that there's at least 3 IPs that like were put out to the fellowship that were originally printed in newsletters. Self-acceptance, One Addict's Experience, and then the Triangle of Self-Obsession were all like pre-gamed in newsletters. So
the newsletters did become quite a hot item, because I know I went to the World Convention in Milwaukee in '82, and I knew I was going to be co-chairing a history workshop there, because I was working on the history. But then when I got there, somebody asked me if I would do an impromptu newsletter workshop, and right around that time, the Mid-Atlantic region wanted to get a newsletter going. And so we decided what we would do, we work on the first issue of the Freedom Connection at that workshop, and we did, and we pretty much finished it at that workshop. I brought a bunch of input that we already had, and then we put that together. And there was somebody at that workshop from Pittsburgh who wanted to start a newsletter in Pittsburgh, Vicky S. And she took a lot of notes, and then she and I were in contact for quite a bit after that. And I think it was like maybe 2 months later, I was asked to speak at a fundraiser in West Virginia, and I had to fly through Pittsburgh. I had to change planes in Pittsburgh, and Vicky met me at the airport with her galley of her draft galley of the first issue of the Miracles Happen newsletter for Pittsburgh. I mean, it was like a big deal right then, like newsletters were just busting, because it was a way of addicts to, they could express what, what they were going through, and it could help someone. It was like, and you didn't have to have there wasn't a time requirement to submit an article or anything. It was just like, talk about how you stay clean today. And that might help somebody who's having a hard time staying clean today, and there was just,
I think it maybe also gave people an outlet like that were a part of the literature movement, and were, like, how do we keep this thing going? And maybe there was some expression, like after the basic text was written, like people got involved with writing local newsletters. Can you reflect on finances? Like I know that was a topic in the literature handbook, like because the basic text was an unfunded project. Like Boyd likes to point that out as a part of his presentation. This was an unfunded project were you guys involved with fundraising to pay for the basic text at all? You know, I know a lot of money flowed in, like through donations, because like we knew that World Services wasn't paying for this book; it was being paid by the fellowship.
Well, I know I kicked in about $25 to help with the printing of the Gray Book, you know, and that's documented somewhere. But I think Joseph was the treasurer, the World Lit treasurer. So he was I think he kept pretty good record of all the finances. But hey, when we had an $847 phone bill at Ivy Land after the 7th World Literature Conference, we had no expectation that anybody else was going to pay that. You know, I was working one job and I went out and got another job, and you know, I worked my ass off to pay that thing off, because I've heard people say that you weren't a real member of the literature committee unless you got your phone cut off. We couldn't afford to get our phone cut off. That was our lifeline, and we were on the hotline. And you know, and that would rotate. You know, who would have the hotline, and if you were on the hotline, you had to be answering your phone. You know, we couldn't afford for that thing to get cut off. But you know, I always knew how to pick up a job, so I'd just pick up an extra job and work for a while, and you know, get until they fired me or until I blew it off to go to another conference. You know, this is how I went through 17 jobs in 4 years. You know, it wasn't all just being a goof off, but you know.
For our local committees, you know, Philly and and Bristol, I don't remember ever anybody giving us a penny. Like, it was all, we just, maybe for the conference, you got something for that. But I'm talking about when we were meeting locally, like, I don't think we kept a treasurer. I just think we, if we needed stuff, we got it.
We did do some fundraising thing.
That's what I was asking. We had
like a pancake thing.
Huh?
Yeah, we did some stuff. Go ahead, Francis.
What I wasn't asking if you guys were getting paid for your work. I was asking is if you guys were also like creating fundraisers to send money in to get the bills paid for the book. You know, like
Pete was talking about fundraising that we did, but if you remember, we had the second East Coast Convention. We were doing fundraisers for that. We were doing dances we were trying to get a clubhouse going in Bucks County, which we wound up passing off to Philadelphia. But we weren't doing any fundraising for the literature movement, at least not that I remember. We were doing fundraising, but not for literature, for other things,
Okay.
That's true. It was for other things. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that I have too many more questions, but Mason might, and I know that Travis has a good one. He's got his one good question that he's been holding back on.
Well,
Mason, you
should have let him loose a long time ago.
Yeah. Let's hear from Travis.
Well, since I'm the newcomer, I figured I would have saved it towards the end of the episode. That's what Mason and Francis like to do, is ask that question for the newcomer, and that's me. So maybe not something you wrote, but out of the stuff that you guys did, what is your favorite piece of those chapters to give to a newcomer, or maybe your most memorable piece that you put together out of all those chapters? What would be the one that you could point to a newcomer and say, this is gold?
One of my favorites is chapter 5. Chapter 5 is What Can I Do? And, to me, that chapter, like, it covers so much. It like gives you specific, concrete things to do. If you're a newcomer, if you're working with newcomers, it's a really good chapter. I think it's the unsung chapter of the whole book. It didn't get a reading, at the beginning of the meetings. It doesn't, it's like the forgotten chapter. But to me, chapter 5 is solid gold. I love that chapter, and it's really good for helping somebody who's new.
So cool. So thank you for that.
For me, the most thing, and I don't know that I got involved with the basic text because I wanted to have a tool to give to a newcomer to help them stay clean. And that was really my motivation. I felt like I didn't have the right words. I was kind of desperate for people, for our fellowship to build, and and I didn't want people to leave, but my favorite part myself is uh, the literature prayer. And because what it reminds me, first of all, when we read that, you could feel the presence of God enter the room. When I went out to Lincoln, Nebraska, I don't know, maybe there was 25 people, 30 people in the room, and we said that prayer, and there were people from all different states. I only knew one or two people in that room. We said the prayer, we worked, after the prayer was said, we worked together like we have been working together all our lives. But the other thing that the prayer reminds me of, and that was also to experience that is like, it's just unbelievable. Like that, God was present when we worked on the basic text for sure. But the fact that when I know definitely in Memphis, we talked about this. We talked about that the book was being written for addicts that hadn't gotten clean yet, for addicts uh, who hadn't picked up for the first time yet, and for addicts who weren't born yet. And Travis, you look like maybe you might fit under the category of addicts that weren't born yet. And
Yeah.
when I hear somebody say that the basic text saved their life, and they fall into that category, it makes me think of all the people that aren't here anymore, that worked on this basic text to have that available for people that weren't born yet.
Well, I appreciate that. Maybe it's the light that makes me look good, but in my head, I was thinking that about the time you guys were writing this book, I was learning to write my name. I'm actually class of 78, but I appreciate
Oh,
that too. I
okay.
could have flattered you guys. I should have worn my "You Are the Book" T-shirt tonight, but I wore it to a meeting last night that I got to help with. So you
Okay.
guys could have seen how much that artwork from then and the book to now really reflected on a newcomer. Because I'm pretty proud of that shirt from listening to you guys and from all that Francis has done with that. So I
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Think most of the people I sponsor weren't born yet.
Yeah.
I'm sponsoring. I'm sponsoring about 18 people, but I'd say about 14 of them weren't born yet. So I get a gratitude rush every time I work with somebody.
I think Mason qualifies.
Yeah, I was not born yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is because of the career that I'm in, I have done extensive amounts of studying on more of the scientific and neurological nature of addiction. And I tell my people that I work with all the time, like everything that we didn't know then about addiction is described perfectly in this literature, except it's in a language in which we understand, which I find fascinating. It's like we that book was put together, and then all of the evidence and the research and advances in technology only go to prove everything in that book is actually what's happening. And the only difference is it's in a language that we can understand, which I find completely fascinating.
It's awesome.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, this was fun. I was glad
Thank you.
that
This was
you
fun.
enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Pete, every time I see you, man, I'm always happy. It just it makes my heart sing, you know.
Same here. Same here.
No.
Well, we both spent a little time away, and we both made our way back, and there's just something about that. That the gratitude that I feel. One. I mean, I owe my life to this guy. He came out and chatted me up at my very first meeting when I was getting ready to book out of there, because I was an old 25 in a room full of teenagers wondering what the fuck am I doing here, and and this guy comes walking out. I'm getting a cup of coffee, and I am not going to take that coffee back into that meeting room. I am taking that coffee up the stairs and out to my car and back the fuck home, because I just didn't see how these teenagers were going to be able to do anything for me. And this guy comes out and chats me up, and next thing I know, I'm walking back in the room, and and the second half of that meeting, the miracle happened for this ad. I left that meeting and I got home and trying to figure out what the hell am I feeling, because I felt something that I hadn't felt in a long time, and I get home and I realize I'm feeling hope. For the first time since I was about 17, I felt hope. Because I'd known I was an addict at 17. I just didn't have the words, but I knew I was trapped. And I just figured at that point, it was just figure out how I can take just enough to allow me to function in the world, but not kill myself. And and NA was the first place that I got any hope that I could actually get clean and not want to kill myself, and be able to function in the world, and that hope came at that meeting, and it only grew from there. It's when I came back from my relapse, I asked George, hey, I just said to George, I can't trust myself. I had every intention of going up to telling my friends what I found here. Instead, I was the one that said, where's the dope? I can't trust myself. And he said, well, the people I see that stick around are the ones that get involved. And then when George came back to the rooms, he let me know. He said, hey, I'm back. And I went up and went to his home group, and I got to see that. And I wasn't ready to come back yet, but I knew that George made it back. So when I finally made it back, and my first meeting back, I swear to God, I'm not making this up. The first meeting back, my home group is still my home group here. It's less than a mile from where I live. We're virtual now because they never opened the doors back up after COVID. But they're a literature study group, and they're reading through the basic text, right? And they're reading the whole thing. And they had just gotten into the stories part where they have the excerpts from stories. Some of the stories that weren't in that issue, but they had been in previous issues. And we're reading I'm reading this excerpt, and all of a sudden, everybody in this room, I'm this new guy in town, right? And I'm reading this thing, and I just started crying. And like they said, what's wrong? And I said, this is my roommate's story. It was George's story that I was reading. And my first meeting back after many years later, it's kind of like, okay, I don't need any more. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm good.
Something, Pete? I told that story to the guys in the book study last night, and they said,
Yeah.
"What's the chances of that happening?" And I told them one more story. I hope you're okay if I tell this one.
I'm good with any story you tell, man.
Okay, all right. So we used to go from Pennsylvania to Virginia, in between Fredericksburg and Richmond, to this Lake Anna with a bunch of people in recovery. And I don't know if we met physically yet, but like
we had, because we had met at the East Coast Convention, I think.
Okay.
In Maryland.
Yeah, okay, that's where we met first. Okay, but anyway, I'm doing dinner with him and his wife Kathy, and we're talking, and he says, well, I go to a different fellowship, and I'm like, dude, I'm just glad that you're still clean, and I said, it's not like you're doing anything crazy, it's pretty much the same thing. There's 12 steps, it's not like you got 2 sponsors or something like that. And he goes, excuse me. And he goes, we have 2 sponsors. And I went, oh, I go, Pete, I had no idea. And he goes, I know. I felt like such an asshole. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I felt like I insulted him and his wife, like in the worst way. You remember that, Pete?
Well, I now that you bring it up, I do. I thought of it, but I didn't have any big reaction to that at all.
I felt like we were rekindling, and I just basically told you that having 2 sponsors is crazy, and that's what everybody does. Like I'm knocking what you're doing, and I'm like, I have no intention of doing that.
Well, actually, that's what they did in South Philly. You'd ask somebody to sponsor you. And they just did it as a practice, so no one person would be set up as kind of like a god kind of thing. I don't know how it started, but they, So I asked this one guy to sponsor me, and he said if you'll let me. That was sort of like the the catchphrase that they would say, and then he said, no, go talk to Joey, and you know, and ask him if he'll sponsor you too. He says, I'll sponsor you. He said, but we do two here. And he said, Joey will probably take you through the steps, and I'll just be the one that you check in with periodically. And that's how they did it. And you know what? That guy, the guy that I didn't ask, the guy that I was assigned to, I couldn't have had a better sponsor.
Nice.
That guy, you know, he just was the perfect sponsor for me. You know, he saw me coming. He's the one that said, you know, if you completely give yourself to this simple program, even you won't be able to fuck it up, you know, on our third step. And you know, this guy was like really serious. You know, he'd been a hardcore, you know, needle addict. And I was like, you know, he gave me no wiggle room. He wasn't a hard ass. He just was to the gravity. He took this stuff so seriously. You know, that when he said something, I took it to the bank, man. You know, and you know, when he said that, I was thinking like, do you realize that I just blew my entire life up at 3 years and 9 months clean? I mean, it was nothing but scorched earth left down in Maryland. You know, I worked, you guys might have heard of Larry North. I worked for Larry North for 9 months, and then Larry had to fire my ass. You know, and I resented, like George talked about, you know, having resentments with Bo and him. I had a huge resentment with Larry. And Larry is this guy, he's like practically a saint in these parts. He was Johnny Appleseed for NA in this whole region of the country. But I couldn't stand him, you know. And he gave me a job. Out of the kindness of his heart, he gave me a job, and I had that job for 9 months, which was a record for me at that point, you know. It was like about my 15th out of the 17 jobs I went through. But you know, I just blew it off, ran off with a newcomer girl that I think I was supposed to be sponsoring or something. You know, it's just like I blew it up good, man. You know, I did everything but get high, and you know. But that was the end. After that, I didn't blow anything else up. I haven't been able to screw it up. So.
Yeah, Francis messaged me. I was at my home group actually. And he's like, I'm talking with Pete and George, and Francis can tell you, like, I don't Wednesday nights, like I work from like 7 in the morning to like 8 p.m. and then I go to my home group, which is at 8:30 to 9:30, and I'm like, I just can't record or do anything on Wednesdays except when it's Pete and George, you know. So I always enjoy listening to you guys, and you know, your stories. It's unbelievable. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much, Mason.
Thanks a lot.
Really, thank you for having interest. You know, just a reason to get together with Pete and shoot the shit is a lot of fun. You know, and you know, and some of the old memories are, you know, you never know what's going to pop up when we get together. You know, but it's funny you brought that story up. That was what we talked to. I told him about that yesterday, about how your first meeting that you were reading my story, and you know, I didn't realize that. I thought it was fifth edition. I didn't realize it was the excerpt, but now
No, it was the excerpt. Yeah.
Okay,
And you know, I didn't even know they had. I mean, that's the first time I ever saw a sixth edition. You know, and you know, I just was like, it was only as we're reading it. Like I didn't know your story was I didn't know that was the title of your story or anything. But I'm reading it. I was like, this is George. You know, I didn't know anyone else who had that story. That you know, I mean, your story was like a great country song, you know, like, you know, my best friend screwed my girlfriend. My other friends didn't tell me. I can't remember if your dog ran away too, but
yeah, you know, my dog ran away too.
Yeah, you had it all going on there, and you had the makings of a perfect country song.
Yeah, I was feeling pretty bad when I wrote that. Yeah, you know, the funny thing is like I've had people come up to me and tell me like, you know, oh my God, your story, like, and I'm like, really?
The title of your story is a country song too. It won't get any worse.
Yeah. I didn't name that. Somebody else did. I have no idea who named it, but it wasn't me. Not, you know, but yeah. But it's a good title for it, because that's the only reason I stay clean.
Yeah.
So you guys were both away, like you said, for a little bit. And now that you've both been back involved for a while, what do you think the big difference is? Like what 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 seems to be better, or is it better now that you're back involved? What was you missing all those years, or was
Oh, I mean, I'll say this, I mean, like I didn't leave out of resentment or anything like that. I just, it's things happen, and, but like I said, I had a really good sponsor that took me through the 12 steps, and he really made it, he made it clear in no uncertain terms that I needed to practice 10 and 11 on a daily basis. He said that, if, you got to keep this connection. He said it was all about having a connection with your higher power. And I always had some sort of, I mean, we kind of created our own spiritual fellowship, even though we weren't part of any official one. We always had other people in our lives, and stuff like that. But what I didn't have was the ability to like sponsor someone, because I didn't, that, since I came back, it's like, and that, that group where I did, that was like 1980, early 84, that I found the group where I found recovery. And the thing that sort of made them outcasts and radical was they were still using the AA big book, not in the meetings, but to take people through the steps, because NA didn't have a step guide yet, and the guy who started that meeting had gotten clean in Cleveland AA, and when he came to Philadelphia, his sponsor told him he should get into NA because he was an addict. And he even got involved with the literature a little bit. He came to a few of the conferences, but he realized that we weren't coming up with anything that was akin to the big book for taking someone through the steps. So he said, well, I got to be able to take people through the steps. So they would do it, and they wouldn't bring it into the meeting. What they failed to do, I mean, you can see this in hindsight, but they should have told people, don't mention the AA big book when you're sharing, because that's what got the group into trouble with the area, because people would say they'd talk about that, I came in, I got a sponsor, I went through the steps, and they would always mention the AA big book. And that's a sixth tradition violation. And I recognize that. I didn't think, when I got, but at that point, I didn't care about what I was affiliated with. I just needed recovery. Because I was, like I said, the last time I blew everything up, I couldn't go through that again. And, when for many years, I didn't think, and that group also believed that you only went through steps 1 through 9 one time, and then you practice 10, 11, and 12 the rest of your life. So I figured I had my shot, and my shot was with AA literature. So I couldn't be in NA without being a sixth tradition violation. I felt that personally, because I was pretty steeped in the traditions, and I didn't want to be a violation of the sixth tradition in NA. So for a long time, I stayed away out of principle. I didn't want to be, and I didn't know how that was going to work when I did come back. I really didn't know how that was going to work. But it was a funny thing. The second meeting, that same meeting that we're reading George's story, I run into this lady who did this, this put together this Back to the Basic, and she was at that time was working on Back to the Gray book. And, and I got curious, and I started picking her brain about, what she was doing and everything. And she basically took me through she took me through all 12 steps and all 12 traditions in both Back to the Basic and Back to the Gray book. And then people started asking me to sponsor them. And at that point I had NA, I wasn't a violation, because I wasn't going to take somebody through NA through the steps out with the AA big book, because I knew that was a violation of the tradition. That's what my group got removed. Well, they got threatened to be removed from the meeting list for that reason. And that's how I wound up leaving. But anyway, so I mean, everything just fell into place. Like I didn't know why I was back in NA, other than the other fellowship in this area sucked. Where I came from, it was great. It was really good. I mean, it was great. I had a great network. It was just, they pretty much, they were as close to this as you could find. But this was, being part of this, it's sort of like it's another dimension of my being. It's like it's that that sense of belonging. I had it there, but I have it here much more.
Yeah.
It's like I don't have to do any interpretation. I don't have to think about what I'm going to say, because there it's sort of like, the literature isn't really in sync with what we know. Here everything's in sync, so I can breathe easier here. So I just feel much more at home here. And to me it's a miracle that I even ever made it back, because my higher power knew before I did that I needed to be here. And then as soon as I got here, it gave me everything I needed to know to be able to stay. As far as NA, I think NA is unbelievable. I think the fact that that we have these connections now. I mean, the COVID really opened up a lot of doors for a lot of people. I mean, geez, about 10 of the people I sponsor are in different countries. Like I sponsor people in 6 different countries only because of COVID. Although I was sponsoring one guy in England before COVID happened, but that was just weird how that came about. But after that, it's like and it's like one of the most important things I have in my life right now is my sponsoring people. I love it. It feels like what I was put here to do. So.
All right. So, what was the question? The differences that I see, is that?
Yeah. Like what is different? What was different? Like, was there something missing throughout all those years that you found now, or what was it? I mean, what's different?
So, I mean, God, our situation was so unique. We had people mostly under 21 was who were in our meetings. That'll never happen again. Ever, like, and there was nobody really showing us how to do it. So we were really, I don't want to say we were floundering, but the big thing for us was unity, and we stuck together and we did everything together. We didn't have a meeting every night. So when we started doing public relations, and when we started doing the convention committee, and we started working on the basic text, that gave us stuff to do on nights when we didn't have meetings, and everybody showed up. So even though we had a small fellowship, we probably had more people in the service meetings than what some of the areas would experience today, because like that was just like, and I also remember when somebody relapsed, like, you know it was scary, because like we were all in this together, and like somebody decided to relapse, like, like it just, I mean, it was more than that, but it also, like,
Yeah.
why didn't they not find it working? Did I not say something? Did I, like, it was a lot of, introspective, like, how come they didn't make it? Am I going to make it? So, uh, when I got clean, there was one meeting in my county where I live right now. Okay, in my area, and my area is relatively small. If I drive half an hour north or half an hour south, I'm out of my area. Okay. But in my area, I can make a 9:30 meeting, I can make a noon meeting, I can make a 5:30 meeting, I can make a 7, 7:30, 8:30, and a 10 o'clock meeting every night. Okay. So the availability of meetings is like just so tremendous. But at the same time, with that is that unity that I talked about, like that can't exist in the size of the fellowship where I'm at today. There is unity, but it's not, like we clung to each other. We were our lifelines, like so that's different. Our literature, the amount of literature that's available is amazing. The amount of let me go on the literature. Okay. I remember when we were workshopping the basic text in Memphis, and Bo had people from the Memphis house. This is at the Memphis conference, so February 81. They had people from the local detox reviewing our literature. as like stuff that we felt was going to go into the grade book. And they say the things that you hear people say today is, I felt like somebody was following me around, writing my story. I felt the spirit in the book talking to me. I felt like this was about, whatever, but the book impacted, like it was talking directly to them. Okay. When I read The Living Clean, my God, there were so many for the first time. There were so many recovery experiences that I felt the same way that a newcomer felt reading the basic text for the first time.
Yes.
Like that
Same
there
here.
are people having recovery experiences. And so that's what I wanted to bring it into. That's what we have today that we didn't
Yeah.
have there. We have so many life experiences. Here, I'll give you a good example. I shared at a meeting last Monday, like 8 days ago. And I went through the steps a little bit and sponsorship and like that kind of stuff. And I thought like I carried a good recovery message. Okay. What the first two people that shared from the floor were that they thanked me for being up there and for the message that I carried because I had my special needs son sitting next to me, and the fact that I could sit up there and he could sit through the meeting and that I was taking care of them. They both had sons like him but younger, and the hope that that gave them. And so, but my point is not look at me. That's not my point. Is that the the life experiences that we have in recovery today are being shared to other people, and we have hope on how we live today, and that we're not the only ones going through this, that there's other people have gone through this and stayed clean, been successful, and have learned how, and we share that experience with each other, and we keep growing as a whole. That's what I see for me as Narcotics Anonymous today is, there's meetings I sit in down here sometimes where there's like 4 people with all over 40 years clean. Not that they're great, but man, do they have experiences living this program, and the trials and tribulations. Not everything they did was great, but guarantee you, like there's a lot of times when I hear people share different parts of my life. I've had that experience. I've had this experience. I've lost a company. I've been through divorce. I have a special needs child. Like there's a lot of different things that I've now experienced. And so I have that experience to offer to people that may be going through something like that for the first time.
Yeah, it was interesting when we interviewed Tom McCall about the Living Clean book, and that was kind of the way that he. Well, the first title was supposed to be From Desperation to Passion. Uh, that was the first working title, and the idea behind it was is that okay, desperation drives us here, but after we get here and the desperation is gone, what ultimately is going to keep us here? We have to translate that desperation into passion. And they looked at it as an opportunity to share 50 plus years of experience in NA and in recovery. Whereas our basic text, as great as it was still the very basic fundamentals of recovery. Whereas the Living Clean is like our 50 plus year experience of being in recovery, which I thought was awesome. And it's a wonderful book.
Oh, they nailed it with that book. They nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. We're just, my home group is just finishing up going through it. It's still a literature group, and we decide our next, what we're going to do once we finish Living Clean is the spiritual principle a day, where we're just going to take whatever that day's spiritual principle is and read it and go through. And then, so like the next year, that day will be a different day because of the way the calendar works. So we're going to be on that one for a while, but I love going through this with a group, kind of like you guys are doing with Living Clean, because you just you really see the value, because not just for yourself, but you see the value, you see what other people get out of it, and you see how they respond to it. And I think I might have started out being a little bit critical of that book, and that was really just out of ignorance. There's a statement that's in the back of the AA Big Book, and I don't hate to bring that up, but it's a statement that means a lot to me. It's it's a quote from some guy where it says something to the effect of um, uh, contempt prior to investigation is the tools of ignorance. Something like that. And absolutely, like I know a lot of the people that were, a lot of the people that worked on the literature with me and George that are still around are very, very contemptuous of some of the newer literature. And, it's easy to get sucked into that, but, you got to take the time. I opened my mind to the Spiritual Principle of Day book when I went to Motorcycle Ed's 47th or 48th anniversary, and he was talking about his group is going through Spiritual Principle of Day book, and I just said if it's good enough for Motorcycle Ed, it's good enough for me. He's the guy that first opened my mind to I first had this vision of NA being this thing that's going to stick around and we're going to have a book and all that in one conversation with that man. That man just sparked something in me that just so I started reading that then as part of my regular reading. I said, those people are nuts. This got a ton of good stuff. It might have a few humorous days, right? But hey, we could always use some humor, right? But I just think that they got a lot of spiritual pride, and I'm just sorry. I'm sorry that's that they still have that going on, but I'm glad I got to get past it, because I know I started out there myself.
Have you ever you ever see the workbook that goes with the Living Clean book?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I have.
It has like any of you guys seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Here,
I'm interested though.
I'll show you. Just grab it. This is what we're using.
While he's doing that, Pete, have you ever seen this? Original Traditions Step Guide. You mentioned the Back to the Basics. That's what my sponsorship family uses to go through the
that's a great tool. It takes you right into the step and the tradition.
But this right here is built the same way, but it's strictly on the traditions, and it's different from the traditions exercise.
Do you know the source of that one? Do you know where that came from?
I do not. That's why I was asking if you were familiar, because I've
used what I do with my.
Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so it goes to each chapter gives you questions to.
Yeah.
Oh, that is
so. So you can use it. You can use that. That allows you to use the Living Clean as.
Here you go. And so how we do it is we read the chapter, and then we read the 5 questions, and then we do a round robin, and you can talk on whatever 1 or 2, however many questions you want to talk about. Whatever ones hit you, that's what you talk about. And that's how we do our living.
Do you know if that's available in any kind of a PDF version?
Yeah, I have a PDF. I can send it to you.
Oh, please do. Because what happens after I go all the way through the steps and traditions, because I go through the 12 steps and the 12 traditions with anyone I work with, and we either use I leave it up to them whether we use the Back to the Basic or the Back to the Gray book, since I've been through both. But once we go all the way through the steps and traditions, we don't go back and go through them again, because that doesn't make sense. But like we want to continue to grow and study recovery. So we will mutually decide on what book we're going to go through, and we go through another book. I've gone through Living Clean. I've gone through It Works How and Why with people. We've gone through some of the some of the older versions of some of these books, and I just do whatever, I try to meet my sponsees where they're at. So, like whatever they're drawn to, to me, it expands my own experience by going through this different literature. So I definitely want to, that'll be another option that I can use, after we've gone through the steps.
Let me show you guys this right here. I'm going to pull it up on the screen. So I had that same problem, Pete. Like, I got sponsees now going through the steps again. So I used AI to help me create something that uses the basic text, and then it'll use It Works How and Why. It's got reading points for every part, and then it'll use the Living Clean, what sticks out on that particular step in the Living Clean. Here's one. So this is like step 5, right? Like, it uses the purpose of step 5, it's got a part in the basic text, it works how and why, and the living clean, and then collect questions for reflection. And the way that I programmed it is like this time through, instead of like answering the question and like checking a box, I want questions that lead to a conversation where we have a deep.
That's what I shoot for with my That's
yeah.
great. You say use AI to help generate the questions. Is that it?
I did. I said I want to take things from it works how and why, the basic text, and the living clean, and implement them into this step guide. And I'm taking a sponsee through. It's the first time I've done it. We're trying that now. And
Would you mind sharing some of those with me?
I sure will.
Yeah, because like I say, I just try to keep my toolbox as full and as varied as I can be, so we have options, because the bottom line is we've got to keep running. And if I can, I never get tired of going through the steps and traditions with somebody. I just never get tired of it. But I know that people, they want to keep the conversation going, but I don't buy into you got to go back to one and go through, just go. It's just, to me, that's just not, it hasn't been my experience, and I just don't think that that's productive.
All right, folks, we cut the recording right there. I really hope y'all enjoyed that. Francis and I didn't know if we were going to make this an episode or not. This was actually a part of one of Francis's history projects where he was going to interview Pete and George about a specific chapter, and we ended up having a pretty good conversation that happened to be recorded. So Francis and I decided to make it an episode. We really hope you enjoyed it, and we will be back next week with another episode. See you then.
Thank you for joining us on our Living Clean podcast. This is another platform that we can share our message of recovery, which is any addict can stop using drugs, lose a desire to use, and find a new way to live. Join that no matter what club. You can contact us through text. The number is 931-306-9364.